I wonder if we're in violent agreement that regulation is the driver here. Hakan, have you seen something different, or would you agree with that about regulation?
Yeah, so I would say from my point of view, we see the development of regulators becoming innovators. Yeah, they intervene much more than before in this space of regulating to a direction of allowing more competition. But I think I do share the views of Carlos on, especially on Brazil. I think it's a good mix, and they have looked into multiple regions to learn from the best. Regulation is, of course, the driver at the end of the day, because that's reality, if you want or not. If you look into the market, regulation triggered the whole topic around open banking, where open banking was not called open banking. When you look into Germany, where open APIs were a normal thing for many, many years, but nobody talked about FinTechs or didn't talk about openness. But now, since we have the open banking term and the regulation in the UK with PSD2 in Europe, other regions have looked into it as well. I think from the regional perspective, I look into open banking globally, but I'm leading our innovation consulting piece for Middle East and Africa. So that's why I'm looking to the region much more focus. I think for the MEA region, taking out the Gulf countries, there's some work going on in Bahrain, for example, which was a kind of first wave of regulation that was implemented for banks to open up last year. So all the banks have to open up technical standards like APIs with a technical standard without any governance around it. The reality was then that, or let's say the purpose of that regulation was to attract FinTechs. It was not to push for competition. It was more really to attract FinTechs, to make the country to attractive place for investors. And the traction was not really there, because standards alone doesn't really help. There is much more required around it. And currently the government, the Central Bank of Bahrain, is working on the second revised version of the open banking regulation, which will be an open banking framework that includes aspects from UK, aspects from PSD2, and aspects from Brazil or from Hong Kong. So they are also now learned that there is much more required than just a standard or just an API, which is a good learning. So we will see some more work in the next couple of weeks. UAE, for example, the Abu Dhabi Global Markets, the regulator, is also planning with some kind of a regulation. I'm expecting a soft regulation, a more collaborative approach with the banks to come up with. Whereas Bahrain is really prescriptive. Other countries like Saudi Arabia or Oman and others, I mean, we have seen some sandboxes in Oman or in Kuwait, but not that much happening right now. But Bahrain is a trendsetter in a way to where other countries are looking at. I think Carlos has mentioned Nigeria. I think Nigeria is absolutely the country in sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa, the country with open banking without regulation. I think there's a lot going on. And South Africa is let's say, a bank consortium that is working on some kind of standards and a collaborative approach in the market, which is a purely market-driven approach. But as you can see, a lot is happening, but we see similar patterns in the MEA region as in other regions as well.
Got it. Well, it doesn't look like I've succeeded in stirring up any controversy yet, but I will bring up one. I want to hear the controversy.
Throw the first rock.
Please.
And it no, nothing to do with what Hakan said. I completely agree. I've got some comments about Bahrain. That's because of some experience that we've had with them. But it's about the issue about regulation. We had the honor to Open Vector met with the governor of Seoul, South Korea, 2018, I believe. And we met with him, and he told us that they've been doing what we now call open banking for quite a long time. And he basically told me that they've realized that because they did not have any level of regulation, nothing's happening in the sense of, yes, there's APIs, but it's the banks handling, monopolizing, using it for their own benefit, and not really doing anything that's really customer centric. And again, you're going to hear me say this, and if I'm the counterweight of that, I'm happy to be. I'm very, very much customer centric here, and hearing South Korea say that they feel that they should have regulated from the beginning is really a good example of that. And again, we take Singapore as another example. There's lots of claims of Singapore doing open banking. In my humble opinion, it's more closed banking, because where you're doing open APIs within your own clients, well, that's not open banking. So we're not hearing a lot of products and services coming out of Singapore because, again, it's very much non-regulated and very market-driven. Traditional banking is a very difficult thing to break, and we have to hope that regulation will help to nudge that. And the unfortunate thing, which I've been labeled as to be using scare tactics, but it's not. It's proving to be true. Is big tech. Big techs are forcing the hand, and they are coming out with the products and services with or without the banks. So this is, again, where I'm hoping that regulation will help to nudge the banks just over the line to allow for this customer centricity.